Hello and welcome to the FDT-TV podcast. This week you join us for the good and the bad, that is football. Mike, how you doing?
Yeah, I'm good, thank you, mate. You've left off ugly and made reference to both of us not being very good looking.
Well, it's good and bad. I was going to go with ugly, but then I thought, who are you going to point the finger at? And then people might get upset. So I thought, for once, I'm not going to put my own foot in my mouth. Well,
I'll hold my hand up. It's fine. I'm an old fart. It's fine.
Okay. And ugly Mike. But this week in football, Juventus have been docked 15 points and currently sit 10th in the Serie A. Naughty. We'll get into that in a little bit. Frank Lampard has been sacked with 3 or 4 managers potentially lined up to take over, and a myriad of VAR controversy yet again. But I think we should start off with a very quick recap of the throwback that was Manchester United-Arsenal, which was very much reminiscent of when they were both on top of the world. Do you think, after that performance, it's going to go back to that way in the next couple of years?
Do you know what? I really hope so. And I said to my dad yesterday that I was hoping for a good game, and boy, did we get it! It was an absolute cracker. The pace in which the game was played at, the number of chances, it was, as you said, it was like a throwback to the late 90s, early 2000s, when the two of the clubs were kind of battling it out for the championship. So yes, I'm very happy with the result. It was great to see us battling, as I said, right to the end and getting that vital winner, because obviously with Manchester City closing the gap yesterday, I know they've still got a game in hand over us, but it was nice to kind of regain that ground again.
Yep.
3, I think, really good. In fact, no, I'd say 5 really good goals, if I'm being completely honest. Both capitalised on their chances. Absolutely cracking goal from Marcus Rashford, and that was one of those ones where even I clapped after he'd scored, because it was an absolute belter. Poor defending. I don't think Ramsdale stood a chance, to be honest. Absolutely superb goal. Saka, in fact, Nketiah with brilliant cross from Xhaka. Had a back stick, headed it in. Saka with an absolute worldie of a goal, kind of like Marcus Rashford's. Then it was Martinez with a header. That, I would say, was a bit of sloppy defending. Poor goalkeeping choice from Aaron Ramsdale, which is something that you kind of can forgive him for, because obviously we won the game, but was just a little bit of a silly, rash decision to come out and try and catch the ball. That's one of those ones I think you got to lump it clear. And as you've said on so many occasions, you take your man out, and I think even if it's one of your own,
yep,
you go through and absolutely take him out. But yeah, it was just one of those things with Nketiah obviously scoring the winner. So I'm really happy with the fact that we got 3 points. I think the neutral is happy, or were happy, because of the fact it was such an entertaining game.
Yeah.
And it was nice to silence some critics, because obviously we got beaten by Manchester United earlier on in the season, our only loss so far this season. So we had a point to prove. And I think more and more so we're seeing it this season, where Arsenal are kind of battling till the end, whereas I'd say even last year there were times where you could see that we'd given up. And it goes back to something that we've said: we don't care what I loosely say we don't care what the result is, as long as your team leave it on the pitch.
Yeah.
And I think we are proving time and time again, even when we play bad, we're still grinding those results out, which is absolutely fantastic to see. Very happy.
And it's one of those that I think, with looking at that Manchester United squad from where they were when Ten Hag took over, because he hasn't been in a year yet, you have to remember that. They've come on leaps and bounds, especially with the struggles they've had with trying to get rid of one of the biggest players in world football, having that big fallout, having an unusual World Cup year. I think give him, as Arteta has, you give him 3 years and a number of transfer windows, and you back him.
Absolutely.
That squad is going to be playing really good football, and I think they will be back to their best. But say it's not an overnight fix, as we can see. There's still some problems within that squad. For me, very reminiscent of when I started watching football when Arsenal, Manchester United were the big teams, and say they entertained, and that's what football's all about at the end of the day. So yeah, it's an interesting one. But you're right. Aaron Ramsdale should have taken out Tomiyasu. There should have been a call for it because there was no danger there. But yeah, if he's going for it, he's got to commit and take him out, even if it means he's going to be injured for the rest of his life. Hence Jordan Pickford and Van Dijk. But yeah, so let's move on from that. Juventus have been docked 15 points for financial irregularities. Now, their lawyers have already come out and said, well, it's no different to any other Italian club does, so I don't know why we're being treated differently. Now, for those of you who have followed football for a long time, cast your minds back, not even that long ago, they were put into Serie B for financial irregularities, and they've worked their way back up and done exactly the same thing over and over again. So if I'm honest with you, I think they should probably just take that on the chin and keep quiet, because it wouldn't surprise me if they go, well, hang on, let's look even further then and what we've been doing, and they get relegated again for that reason. Now, there's been a number of bans handed out, one of which, or most prominent of which for us in the Premier League, is Tottenham's transfer chief. I can't pronounce his name, but he has received a 30-month ban only from Italian football. He was the Juventus director of football, currently Spurs managing director, but he's the guy who sorts out all their transfers. And what essentially he's done or said to have done is that all the player transfers that were received during COVID, all the transfer fees were inflated, so that it tried to balance the books a bit more. And that their players' wages and staff wages were either sacrificed completely or deferred during COVID, but they can't quite work out which. Different parties are saying different things, which is why there's irregularities. That being said, UEFA are also investigating them because they were meant to break even last year, and leading into this year, they've posted 220 million euros worth of losses. So they're now looking at it as well for further sanctions and possibly kicking them out of the Champions League this year or next year, one of the two. So yeah, it's an interesting story, I think, but not one, unfortunately, that's that uncommon within football, that people are taking advantage financially of players and fans, because that's who I feel sorry for, is the staff, the players and the fans of that club who do put in their well-earned money or their time and their effort, and yet the people who are above that and have controlling interests go, do you know what? We can make money ourselves here. We can take a little bit out, and no one's going to notice. But yeah, what do you make of it? Do you? The big question is, I think, do the Premier League look at the fact that Italy, they haven't released yet a proper written statement of the charges. They're taking their time and going through everything with a fine-tooth comb before they do that. I think last year they was rumoured to be suggested a 9-point deduction. But do the Premier League look at Tottenham's managing director and say, hang on here, you've had a big involvement in this, they've banned you before they've gone through everything. They've got enough evidence to say we don't want you to be in our footballing world for at least a couple of years. Do they look at that and say, well, we need to follow suit and look at what he's doing? Because the allegation has come out that the signing of Christian Romero, the defender, was he was trying to get that price inflated even more to help out his former club. So there that is that allegation while he was at Tottenham. But what do you make of it? Do you think they should look into it, or do you think it's just a case of let the Italians do what they do and wait to see what happens over here?
To be honest, transfer fees. If I can just touch on that very quickly.
Yep.
I think regardless of the club, I think the amount of money that's thrown around in transfer fees is ridiculous. Obviously, I get that there's a financial reward for obviously where your team finishes within the leagues or whatever, and obviously that helps towards the running of the club. But when you see all these agents and stuff, I mean, you mentioned last week about a new documentary that's come out on Sky,
Yes,
for the transfer business or whatever it is. Still something I still need to watch, but I think the money that's thrown around is absolutely ludicrous. Now, just going back to what you were saying, just in relation to investigations, I kind of sit on the fence with this one, because at the end of the day, I mean, it's probably not uncommon for those sorts of situations to occur in our league.
Yep.
And I think Sam Allardyce was one of the ones that got kind of found out for this whole third party, always around a third party agency or whatever it was.
Yep.
So it's obvious that it does go on in football, and it was just unfortunate that Sam Allardyce at that particular time had just taken over the England job he was after for absolutely ages, and managed to nose it up in 2 or 3 weeks or whatever. So there's obviously some sort of corruptness within the game. However, just like you said, I feel it's only damaging the reputation of the Italian leagues.
Yep, at the moment.
At the moment, yes. So from that side of things, I feel like the points deduction or chucking about the league or whatever, they're only hurting themselves by doing it. Mm-hmm. Now, but the other reason why I feel like we should do some investigating on our side is because of, if you've done it once and got away with it, you're going to try and do it again.
Yep.
Now, we know Daniel Levy is a man who's very driven by money.
Yep.
And if the club can siphon off some from whatever source, I think the majority of clubs, this may sound bad, but I think the majority of the clubs would try and look to do that in any way, shape or form. Mm-hmm. Now, I draw a conclusion from this whole Mudryk deal.
Yep.
It's not just sour grapes for us missing out on Mudryk. I think it's an astronomical fee for a player that's still very young.
Yep.
Looked very promising. I've got to say, from the Chelsea game, he did look very promising. So I kind of get it. And I suppose nowadays clubs are looking for the younger model, if you like, in order to improve their team, and there's the potential there. But, and I think it was Shakhtar come out and said that £20 million of that deal was going to be going into the soldiers.
Yep.
Which, if it's true, is a very noble cause. I don't think they will get that amount of money paid out to the forces or whatever. There's going to be, again, some shady back-ended deals and stuff like that. So, yeah. I do agree some investigation should go into it, but at the same time, I think ignorance is bliss.
Yeah,
in a way, if that makes sense. Yeah. Or not so much ignorance is bliss, because that's obviously accusing them of something when we don't know the full facts of it. Ignorance is bliss. That's not what I was going to say. It is. I suppose don't judge him before.
Yeah.
Before any investigations go through, because that may be the way that the club wanted him to operate. Maybe didn't feel comfortable, and which is why he's come over to the Premier League.
Yep. They say there are a number of other people who have been banned from Italian football for that. So you may have hit the nail on the head there. It may have been an instruction. At which point, what do? You follow what your boss says. He's paying your bills.
Yeah.
So yeah. I do get that. What do you make of their excuse though? Everyone else is doing it, so that should be okay. Why are you treating us different? Because for them to say,
that's one of these ones.
I was going to say, for them to say that, they would have to have some sort of tangible evidence rather than just throwing mud. Or are they throwing mud just to see what sticks?
I think it could be very much a throwing mud. But again, it wouldn't surprise me. It wouldn't be the first time, and I'm sure it won't be the last time it's happened in Serie A for clubs being accused of fiddling the books and all this sort of stuff. So obviously you mentioned the earlier case for Juventus, and I think one of those ones it's I mean, you see it in the financial services industry, is that if you go in and investigate the big players or whatever, and you find out that there is some dodgy dealings, you can hand out fines. It will damage the reputation of that firm, and secondly, it will put the fear of God into any of these smaller firms or whatever that think, oh, we're getting away with this, and they may end up then bucking their ideas up. So I think Juventus, with being a massive club, of which they are, with a history of doing it before, it, again, wouldn't surprise me if it is going on, but I think they could just be going, well, everyone else is doing it.
Yeah.
Investigate everyone else. And I suppose for, in a sense, I kind of see that they should be investigating other clubs. I mean, if other clubs are saying, no, we're not doing that or whatever, then there should be no problem with investigations going on.
Yeah.
I think if you make an example of the bigger clubs first, then the rest should follow suit.
Yep. Yeah, no, that's fair enough. So it's just one of those things you would have hoped for the fans' sake that they would have learned from history. Clearly they haven't. So yeah, I'm sure that story will rumble on for a number of years until it comes to some sort of final conclusion. Something that has come to a conclusion is Frank Lampard's stewardship at Everton. He has been sacked after under a year in charge. He took over them when they were really suffering last year under Rafa Benitez. He steadied the ship and stopped the rot, kept them in the Premier League. I know people say, well, he didn't improve them. No, but he stopped them getting relegated. I'm fairly confident to say that. Since then, obviously, they've brought in some really awful players. They've sold their big players. The fans want the ball down, and the owner. And it's all gone very bad. Obviously, it was us that put them to the sword on Saturday. We'll come on to that because I think they were quite harshly dealt with by VAR. But we'll get into that. But yeah, so let's take a quick look at Frank Lampard. Obviously, now he's been sacked. Dele Alli was brought in for a reported final fee of 40 million with the add-ons. I don't think that's ever going to happen because he's currently at Besiktas and can't get a game because he's awful. I think that's more of an attitude thing rather than a footballing ability, if I'm totally honest. Had he bucked his ideas up when actually he left the Champions League club to go to a relegation battle, I think he could have been a mainstay in that team and become the player they built the team around, but that's not going to happen. Obviously, Richarlison this season has gone the other way for fairly big money. One of their big players, Calvert-Lewin, has been out injured for a lot of the season. We're starting to see him come back. Who did they buy to replace the goals of Richarlison and Calvert-Lewin? None other than Neil Maupay, former Brighton striker who, if I'm honest, is a little bit shit. They brought in an old favourite in Idrissa Gana Gueye back from PSG, and Connor Cody and Tarkowski, who, if I'm totally honest, I think are all right, but they're not going to save you. Tarkowski, I think, was at his peak maybe 4 seasons ago, but yeah, he's not at the races anymore for me, being that guy you want to lead your back line. Certain experience, but it's not working. For me, they played some good football over their time. He made some tactical mistakes. He's a younger manager early in his career. So some of those mistakes are to be forgiven. But he must have been doing something well because cast your mind back to August when Chelsea were trying to buy Anthony Gordon for £40 million. Player that he's sort of gone off the boil a little bit now. But he must have been doing something right with them to get a player like that to be worth £40 million. And I just think it's very hard. When he come in, they said, all the players said, all the staff said, actually, this has been awful under Benitez. He's ruined the spirit of the club and everyone's really down about it. To turn that around is really hard to do. So to do what he's done with a team that I think is below par for the average Premier League team now, has been badly invested in and is lacking confidence. It's a really hard job to do. So they are currently sitting 19th on 15 points, level with Southampton, but they have decided now's the time to give them the chop. And I think, if I'm honest, I would like your opinion on it. I think the board and the owner, Mr. Farhad Mashiri, have done that to try and take some pressure off of them to go, right, we're going to appoint this new spang-dangled manager and it's all going to be happy. I think he's become the scapegoat for what the fans want, which is really new owners. But what's your take on Lampard leaving?
It's something we've been speaking about for a couple of weeks now, and if I'm being completely honest, I'm surprised it didn't happen sooner.
Yep.
Just based on the results and where they were kind of sitting. I do, like you, feel a little bit sorry for Frank Lampard. I think he's got a good future in management. Did okay in his first season at Chelsea with bringing through the academy lot, and we've seen some very promising players coming out of that group. But I think the problem with Everton is that I think the damage had already been done under Benitez.
Yep.
I heard earlier that they've had 5 different managers in 6 years, so they're just coming on to their 6th manager, as and who is appointed. There's been a few names kind of bandied around in a bit, which I'm sure you'll come on to in a second. But yeah, I suppose I do feel a little bit sorry for Frank. And from listening to TalkSport earlier on today after the announcement, and from looking at social media, if I'm being completely honest, there's, I think, a number of Everton fans that will be a little bit gutted by this, because I think they are aware of the problems at Everton are not necessarily from the manager, but as you say, from the board.
Yep.
Which is a shame. I mean, I suppose in a sense you can't argue the fact that they've not been invested into, because they have made some reasonable signings.
Yep.
I think you would say, but I think that accompanied with the turmoil at the club, I think, is the best way to put it. It's kind of like beating a dead horse. But I mean, I suppose the same could be said for Bournemouth and Fulham. I think if you do get the right manager in, it's amazing what you can do with that.
Yeah.
I mean, Leeds have done okay, but I think Bournemouth and Fulham are the teams to obviously take a good example of that.
Yeah.
Wasn't working out with the managers at the time. Obviously made changes, and they've come on in leaps and bounds. But it'll be a shame, because I think they've been in the top flight for the last 26 years. I think I can't remember what the stat is exactly, but they've been in the top flight for quite a long time.
I don't think they've ever been relegated from it.
Oh, okay.
I think they're one or two clubs that have never been relegated.
Yeah, the other one's us.
Yeah.
So since we've been in the top flight, we've never been relegated. But it will be a shame if they do get relegated. The board now need to sit down and work out who's going to be the best man for that job. I don't. Whoever's going to go in has got a difficult job ahead of them. Yeah, regardless.
And it's one of those that say, as you said, they have spent money, but in my opinion, say it is an opinion. People who have this opinion, I think it's been the recruitment's been poor, if I'm honest. And I think you can see the difference between. And this might sound a little bit odd, but Arsenal's recruitment policy has changed in the last 4 years. And you can see the difference that has made to the club, where before it was, let's go and buy this person. They've had a good season. Let's go and buy that person. And you was sort of mid to upper table anguish. You've had a few seasons to sort it out and had a clear vision in line, and it's reaping the rewards. As you said, Everton have chopped and changed managers. So they're suffering for it. But people that could be going into the job, I think there's one that they really want, but there are 5 names that I've seen linked heavily with it. Some I think will just be rumours, and those two being Wayne Rooney and Thomas Frank. Thomas Frank's just signed a new Brentford deal, and I think he is a very good manager, but I can't see him wanting to leave Brentford, who are sitting 8th, looking like they're going to get some form of European football and push on and get invested into for a relegation battle that potentially is going to end up going bad. Wayne Rooney, it's his boyhood club. I can see him managing them at some point, but I think that may be next season. I don't think he's going to come in for the relegation fight. I think he may go in if they get relegated and go from there, because I think that even with the poor quality of the squad, they will fight at the top of that championship team or championship table, I should say. And the ones that have been linked with it that I think are more likely, David Moyes, believe it or not, has been linked with a return to Everton. We see him there under his stewardship. They always sat sort of as the best of the rest, didn't they? So there are good times under Moyes, there are bad times under Moyes. If I'm honest, I would quite happily swap Frank Lampard for David Moyes, but that's a different story. But I don't think he will go while he's still in a job. The two that I think are more likely are both unemployed at the moment. One being Sean Dyche, who's being linked with all sorts of jobs left, right and centre, but a man that's is going to make you solid at the back. He's worked with Tarkowski before, so that's an easy one to get to draw your back line in. But he could make them hard to beat. They have got a lot of experience within that squad. The other one, which is being pushed more as an agenda, is Marco Bielsa, the former Leeds boss, who has been out of a job since they sacked him last year. Plays some expansive football, which is what Everton fans seem to like. And I think the trouble with that is it goes one of two ways. It works really, really well, or they get tonked. Now, with Leeds, it took 2 years for them to get promoted under him because his style of play is exhaustive. And they needed a big squad and they needed time to get accustomed and attuned to it. He did make players better. That's arguably a point. But is half a season long enough to change their fortunes? There is obviously plenty of time saying that to win points, but to change a style and a fitness level completely within that time is going to be quite a difficult task, especially Binaz. I feel the Premier League this year is probably a lot more competitive than it has been in the last 5 or 6 years.
Yeah, I completely agree. For starters, we're still sitting at the top of the league. So, but I think the gaps from second place downwards, it's nice. It's nice to see not the usual players. When I say players, I mean the teams. Obviously, looking at the top four, so Man City, Liverpool, United, to an extent, Spurs. It's nice to see that there's a bit of a mix-up, and it's crazy to think. Obviously, when you look at the teams, I think that got promoted.
Yep.
And looking at previous seasons, you kind of almost expect there to be kind of like a bit of a yo-yo effect. I know there are obviously certain exceptions to that rule, but it would, I suppose, it would be gutting from a Premier League perspective to see the likes of Everton, a mainstay within the Premier League, to be relegated down.
Yeah.
Like I said, I think they do need to pick the right appointment. Do you know what? I do agree with you. I do think that Everton will go back. Sorry, Everton. I do think that Wayne Rooney will go back to Everton to manage them. And I suppose I could almost see that appointment because you kind of almost get a bit of a free hit for the rest of the season.
Yep.
If you do well, then brilliant. He's the best man since sliced bread, sort of thing. But at the same time, if you're gonna go down, you kind of got the excuse, well, it's not my fault. I come in, we were rock bottom.
Yeah.
Do you know what I mean? And
Give
then
me a
you can
fresh
build on
start,
next
yeah.
year. And obviously, he's got experience from working in the championship anyway. So that wouldn't surprise me. I do think though they will go with someone like a Sean Dyche. But like I said, I think anyone that goes into that job has got their work cut out massively. They're going to have to change the whole culture, the philosophy.
Yeah.
As very much as we see with Arteta, that we were broken. There was a broken fan base. There was a rotten from the top downwards.
Yeah.
And it's going to take time. I don't think Everton fans should expect an overnight fix, because whoever comes in, they've got to, as you said, instill their philosophies and all that sort of stuff. So need to be a little bit realistic, and that's why I think if Wayne Rooney was to go in, kind of almost gets a bit of a free hit for the remainder of the season, and then go again from next year.
And it is one of those that, as you said, it's going to take time. Sometimes it gets worse before it gets better. I think we've all experienced that. But it is a case, I think, if they stuck with Frank Lampard and given him 3 years, I think they would have reaped rewards from that. Because, say, as you said, he works real well with the youngsters. You can see he's trying to instill philosophy, but he's still early in his career, so it's always a difficult task. Now the question being, do you think we'll see him back in the Premier League, or do you think he'll step away and maybe take a drop down to the Championship, or maybe go to Scotland or to Spain or somewhere like that? Probably a Juventus job going pretty soon. But do you know what I mean? Do you think he'll go away and hone his craft a little bit more before coming to have another crack at it? Because I think at the moment he's had a Chelsea job, which is always a death sentence. When he took over, he did 18 months. I don't think he did terribly within those 18 months. The season he got sacked, they won the Champions League, so some of that has to be down to him. He's gone to Everton under hard circumstances. They're a broken club, and he's trying to fix them. Do you think he needs one just to go away and enjoy the managerial side of the job?
I do think he needs to take a break from football, regardless, because you could just see the look on his face yesterday. He did look like a bit of a broken man.
Yep.
Again, I know he's kind of had to have it or to deal with it all over the course of the year. But not only that, I mean, even when he lost the Chelsea job, his club, Mr. Chelsea, he other than John Terry, whatever, but it's going to take it out of you. Do you know what I mean? So I do think he needs to take 6 months out of the job just to kind of refresh his batteries, because it looks like he's kind of at the end of the tether. And I know that's one of the things I suppose you need to expect from looking after such a demanding club within a demanding league, if that makes sense. So not specifically Everton, but obviously his time at Chelsea as well. So 6 months out for me. And then I don't know. I mean, I think a Championship side would be better for him, because he's had 2 cracks of the whip now at Premier League clubs and hasn't really succeeded. But again, you never know if someone like, I don't know, looking at the lower leagues like Southampton or whatever, if they manage to stay in the division, could they come for Frank Lampard and look to give him the opportunity, to give him the time in order to build a project? Yeah, I think he's more likely to be able to do that within a Championship side, and the only reason he left Derby was because of the Chelsea job that come up. Yeah, otherwise he would have. I think he would have stuck at it, and I think we would have seen a different Derby. But maybe the Championship is the best way forward for him. Only if he's going to get a proper crack, another Premier League team.
Now, here's the thing. It's a difficult one. So I think, if I'm honest, I'd be inclined to agree with you. I think that'd probably be the best thing for Frank Lampard. But playing devil's advocate, I did say I would prefer him to David Moyes at West Ham. Would it be unreasonable to let David Moyes walk away for nothing, let him go back to Everton because you know he's going to make them worse because he's been playing awful football at West Ham. Bring in Frank Lampard back into the West Ham fold. Give him an opportunity to make it back up for leaving to the faithful. Obviously, his old man was West Ham through and through. Bring in Uncle Harry as the assistant manager and let him and David Gold, so yeah, whatever one's left, be wheeler dealers in the transfer market and get some transfers over the line that are not injured. Because I think it could be a project he would be interested in. We seem to stick with managers for a little while. But yeah, I feel like that could be an olive branch for him to fix it with the West Ham fans, especially if he keeps us up and we play reasonable football. Because the style of football he's trying to play is what's known as the West Ham way, isn't it? That attractive, fast-paced passing. And I think you'd have to argue on paper we have the better team suited for that than we do playing David Moyes football. But yeah, I think it's unlikely. But it's a suggestion. So, before we go any further, I think we have to look at... we'll get onto the Everton-West Ham game in a moment, because I did say about there were some controversial decisions, which I think maybe led to Lampard getting a sack. Not entirely, but certainly on that weekend. Erling Haaland has to be put down as the good in football. We've done a couple of bad, so it's time for a good before we get on to more bad. Erling Haaland, he's got 25 goals in the Premier League this season. They're, 19 games in? Manchester City?
No, they're 20.
20 games in. Okay, so just over half a season. Now, within the last 10 years, there are only 5 players who've won the Golden Boot who have scored more goals than he has, and he's got 18 more games to play. One of them only being 1 goal ahead, the highest being 32. He's currently on 25, which is phenomenal. I couldn't find anywhere to take my bet of 40 Premier League goals in a season at the beginning of the season. I will say I did keep saying that. But what was it? Where was it going with this? Do you think he's going to break the scoring record for the Golden Boot? Do you think he's going to be the top scorer in a season ever?
Yes.
I think what's the current title? The current title I think is 32.
Yeah, wasn't that Salah a couple of years ago?
Yeah, 32. Mohamed Salah, 17-18. So I think he's smashed it out of the park. And do you know what the scary thing is about it? Is you have to say, looking at Manchester City, they are not the same monster they were last year or the year before. Mm-hmm. If they get back to their best, which I think they will at some point, that's going to be scary. Because, yeah, they're playing arguably a lot worse than they have been, and he's still scored more goals than the last year's Golden Boot did.
It is mental. I completely agree with you that I think he's going to smash the record. He's probably going to smash. So what is he? 7 goals off of the current record.
Providing he doesn't get injured.
Yeah, exactly. I think we could be looking 4 or 5 more games. Obviously, injury permitting, and I think he'll beat that. Towards the end of the season, it wouldn't surprise me if he ends up with... It wouldn't surprise me if he ends up hitting 40. And I think that is a record, providing that none of the rest of the teams end up with squads that are completely broken, and end up having to go with like under 15s for their teams. I don't think it'll be broken, certainly within our lifetime. No. Obviously, I'm not saying it's an impossibility. But I mean, even going back to a couple of seasons ago, if we look at Mohamed Salah, did we ever think you'd get someone that would score 32 goals in a season? Probably not. It's no mean feat, but the guy is an absolute machine. And I think the most humbling thing about this is the fact that he is so humble.
Yes.
I think he can acknowledge that he is a good striker, but I think you mentioned it at the start of the season, just to say that he wants to get better.
Yeah.
He wants to improve. And dare I say it, but how can you improve on perfection?
You can join West Ham, mate. That's how.
Yeah. I think his overall. I think the trouble with Manchester City at the moment is they've obviously been playing a certain way for a number of years, which has been obviously successful.
Yeah.
I think the difficulty that they're possibly having at the moment is being able to understand what he's thinking.
Yeah.
Or to adapt to him playing, because he's an absolute machine. He's quick. He's got an absolutely phenomenal footballing brain, and knows where the back of the net is, obviously. I agree with you. I do think City are going to go on a bit of a run. And I think there's still every likelihood that they could win the league this year. There's only 8 points in it. We've got to play them. Oh, sorry, there's only 5 points currently in it, and we've got to play them twice. But we have got a game in hand. So providing we win our game in hand, it'll go back up to 8. So even if we were to lose those 2 games, that would bring the points deficit down to 2. Now, providing that we match or better, we could win the league, which would be unfathomable because it just hasn't happened for us for 20 years. But yeah, I think with him in your team, with him fit, scoring goals, there's every likelihood that they could win the league this year.
Yeah, and it's one of those that you never really want to bet against him when he is playing.
No.
And I think in some senses, them being behind may help them in the fact that the pressure's not on to keep up that lead. It's at that side of things. So it's a double-edged sword. Another interesting fact, he's scored more hat-tricks in the Premier League than Ronaldo did over both stints at Manchester United. And Ronaldo's in that argument for best ever. So just a scary stat there. But let's get on to other footballing games around the Premier League. So I've looked at it from a very quick recap. Looked at it from VAR perspective as to decisions correct, decisions wrong, and decisions that are somewhere in the middle. So by my count, 7 wrong decisions, 3 correct decisions, 3 somewhere in the middle decisions. And we'll start with the West Ham game. So Everton, very early on, should have had a handball penalty. It was a penalty. Ogbonna slipped over, smashed the ball out of the way with his hand, which made it fall to one of our players to clear rather than one of their players to score. So wrong decision. The first Jared Bowen goal, who scored 2, I would say it looked offside. However marginal it is. So that's one of those that goes down as a possible wrong decision. Not a right decision, not a wrong decision, but one of those that is hard to tell. Second goal, no discrepancy. We should have scored that. But had the first one been given as a penalty, that could change the momentum. Had our first one been ruled out, again, change the momentum. But yeah, we got the rub of the green on this occasion, and hooray. That's all I'm going to say.
About time.
It's a bittersweet one, isn't it? Because I want us to get rid of Moyes because I don't think one result doesn't change it against arguably the other team that's in the worst form of the season.
Yeah,
it's not a benchmark, or if it is, it's not a good one. We beat the other team that's going to get relegated. Well, hey, especially that, and we've let Craig Dawson join a relegation rival, rightly so, and he's one that I will eat my hat over because he was phenomenal, gave everything while he was on the pitch, not the best player, but did really well. And we signed £15 million Danny Ings, who Moyes left on the bench until like the 85th minute, and guess what? He's injured and will be out for the next 7 weeks minimum. So, yeah. What is it, 53 strikers since Golden Sullivan took over, 23 of them have never scored a goal for West Ham. So that's that one. Southampton, Aston Villa. I say jump in at any point that you wanna go, because I'm just going to try and rattle these off as quickly as possible so we can get some predictions.
You rattle them off, mate. Rattle them off.
So the first goal was a correct decision. they got ruled out for offside. The second goal was ruled out for a foul, which, in my opinion, is a wrong decision. So player went in, gave him a little push in the back with his arm as they were challenging for the ball. The player took 2 or 3 steps and then went down from his knees once he realised, someone touched me. So he could have played the ball. There was no reason for him not to, so I think that's a wrong decision. The VAR sent the ref to watch the screen. He watched it several times and still stuck with his decision as to it was a foul. And Aston Villa goal, Ollie Watkins was offside. He was kept onside with the Lions by an arm, which, from what they've said in their post-match things, an arm can't be used to score, so it can't be used to draw the offside line. But not in this case. Then again, Aston Villa are lucky to be in the Premier League, aren't they? Who forgot to turn on goal line technology a couple of years ago? Yeah. Bournemouth versus Nottingham Forest. Willy Bolly was offside for the first goal. And it was ruled out correctly. Hey, well done. The Bournemouth goal I've got no issue with. And the Forest equaliser, the line was drawn about 3 inches away from the defender. Their goal looked offside, if I'm honest, but the way the line was drawn, very hard to tell. So I've put in there, it's a little bit suspicious. But what I would say is Nottingham Forest are playing much better with Morgan Gibbs-White back in the team after a lengthy injury. Obviously one of those players who won the Under-17s World Cup with Steve Cooper. So yeah, but say, looks like a cracking player. We never see the best of him at Wolves. Chelsea-Liverpool. Or Liverpool, as I should say. They got the rub of the green again when Kai Havertz's goal was ruled out for offside. It was off. It wasn't offside, and it can't be offside because the ball was played by a Liverpool player. Alisson made a save, but he pushed the ball onto the post and back out into play, which Kai Havertz pounced at. And what they're saying is, well, because his left foot was in front of the ball when he kicked it, it's offside. I'm sorry, that's bollocks. It's not offside because a Chelsea player didn't play in the ball. Alisson saved it. If he hadn't saved it, it would have gone in. It would have been a goal. So then, therefore, cannot be offside. So yeah, that was a wrong decision. But what I would say, and my note here is Mudryk. Arshavin-esque. Needs someone to tell him to get rid of that stupid centre parting though, as he looks like a Wally.
A very valid point.
That's what. Watching him, it did remind me a bit of Arshavin. That quick feet, taking on 3 or 4 players, being able to squeeze through those tight spaces, fantastic little control. Will he be able to capitalise on it? I don't know. But putting him up against Trent Alexander-Arnold was probably a good idea. But yeah, we'll wait and see. But certainly that haircut, I mean, I've had some dodgy haircuts over the years, so I'm one to be able to talk on this. That's awful. Palace Newcastle. The Newcastle penalty appeal there was a shot went in, Mitchell handballed it, they looked at it at VAR and it was correct. They didn't give it as a penalty because short of chopping off his lower arm, there's nothing he could have done to get his arm out of the way, and it was in a natural position. He was trying to move it out of the way at the same time, closer to his body. There's nothing that he could have done. So again, correct. So I am calling the VAR correct when it is. It's just not as often as it should be. But what I've put on there is Palace are back to being their stubborn best, hard to beat, but there's not a lot going forward. And Newcastle, if I'm totally honest, should have won that game about 6-0. Lots of chances, just couldn't eat their dinner. And breathe. Leicester-Brighton. Leicester's first goal was blocked for handball. The ref let play go on. 2 more shots were rattled off, and it went in. This is a dubious decision, in my opinion, because should it have been stopped for handball in the first instance, or should it have been allowed to bumble around a couple of times and hit a couple of players from both teams before it finally, a shot went in past, Sanchez at Brighton? I don't know. This is a possible wrong decision for me, but possible right decision, because a goal did go in, which is good. But it was quite clearly handball in the first instance. So half a one, half a dozen the other. I
think the argument for that, sorry, just to chime in on that one, I think this goes back to this whole phases of play business, whether it's a direct phase or a secondary phase or all that sort of shit. Personally, I agree with you. If it's handball, it's handball.
Yep.
It should be chalked off because you're giving a club an unfair advantage. But just my opinion. What do I know?
Yeah, and it's one of those. Had it not been handball, the first shot I think would have gone wide, so it would have gone out for a goal kick. So it's one of those. Yeah, it's a difficult one. Danny Welbeck got kicked in the foot, and it was not given. And VAR looked at it and said no. Quite clearly, it was a foul. He got kicked in the penalty box, so they should have been given a penalty, and they weren't. City Wolves. I've got one from this one, and that was Jack Grealish was... two. Jack Grealish was not given a penalty. There was some contact. He went down like a sack of potatoes, as he's known for. The ref didn't give it. They looked at it at VAR and said, no, that's correct. You shouldn't have given that penalty. However, my thinking on this... He did get kicked and taken down, so it should have been a penalty, as light as it was. But if he hadn't been given a penalty, then why wasn't he booked for simulation and a free kick given the other way? That's my thinking, because it's not like he just fell over. He went down and rolled about, and it was that scream. So yeah, but however, second half comes along. Gundogan goes down in the box. Wasn't touched by Ruben Neves. However, it was given as a penalty, and VAR didn't even want to look at it. So was that a case they went, actually, we fucked up here. We need to give him a penalty. So that one was given. So that's two incorrect decisions. If I'm honest, if you look at it in the wider picture, correct decisions, but the wrong way around. Same opportunity to score. But my other note from that is that Grealish is looking back near to his best as he was at Aston Villa. He's found a little bit of confidence, and I think there's a reason behind that. I'll get into that in just a second. And final, actually two more. Leeds Brentford, nothing of note. That was the most boring game of the weekend. Worse than Chelsea Liverpool. It was awful. Yeah. And then Arsenal Manchester United, I've just put nothing of note, back to the old days of Arsenal and Manchester United dominating ? So a lot of decisions there. Some I think you could count as opinions with whether it should be or shouldn't be, but then it's not a clear and obvious error, so it shouldn't have been overturned or shouldn't have been looked at. But yeah, it's just one of those, again, there's more wrong decisions than there are right. And the right decisions that were given were good. And they did look at it, and they did use the systems properly. But why are the other 7 or 10 either dubious or wrong? I really don't understand it.
This is what I said to you last week about this. Was it Dermot Gallagher coming out and saying some of these decisions are subjective? And I completely disagree with it. It really infuriated me listening to that bullshit where he come out with last week. Excuse my language. I don't understand how some of these decisions could be subjective.
Yeah,
it's either it is or it isn't. And again, just going into the fucking, you get your set of rules, and then you get variation. You get conditions as to whether it complies to that rule or not. So again, I think it's a load of horseshit. Too often we're seeing inconsistencies, and it's really starting to aggravate me. I think the only difference that needs to be done next year, nothing to do with technology. They need to look at some of the rules again and readdress the rules. Yep. So there's no grey areas. You're either offside or you're not. It's either a foul or it's not. Handball, it's either handball or it's not. Yep. It doesn't make any difference regardless. Just take it back to simple football. So there's no grey areas.
Yep.
And I'd say probably get rid of half of the officials that we've got within the league, because there's no repercussions for these if they do make incorrect decisions, and it could affect the financial well-being of one of these clubs from one or several dodgy decisions. So, yeah, I think That's just my opinion on VAR. I'll probably keep saying it until something does happen.
Yeah, which will probably be after we're gone. Yeah. So here's my thing on Jack Grealish, because it's similar to something that Jared Bowen said in an interview post match, which really did make me think. So Jared Bowen scored 2. He's been missing all season. Some would say that's because he's been porking his missus because she's now expecting twins. But what he said is he was trying so hard to impress every opportunity to win a place in the England squad, which was a possibility, and he didn't handle the pressure well, and it actually made it worse because every time he mucked up, he then had to try extra hard, which meant he mucked up the next one. And Jack Grealish has had some hit or misses, but since the World Cup's finished, he's full of confidence. It's not like he's come back having been a World Cup winner, but his game's different. Marcus Rashford, no one scored more goals in the league since the World Cup. Is it a case that the World Cup in the middle of the year has really ruined the mentality of some of these players who are trying to over-impress? And it just really reminisced with me that actually that's just England players. When you look across how many countries we're playing at the World Cup and how many players play in the Premier League, is that why maybe the league is so close, because players were trying to over-impress?
Quite possibly, and it's a good shout. I suppose you never really think of that side of the football.
No.
And I suppose at the end of the day, these are people as well. There are going to be times that they make mistakes, and for whatever reason, and there is, I suppose, an unnecessary pressure that they put not only on themselves but on their teammates as well. Because if they try to impress, cock up, there are possibly repercussions that could come as a result of that. If you give the ball away in the wrong area, for example. I think it's a bloody good shout. 100%.
It's certainly food for thought for me. And I think a lot of people, if they've listened to that and actually digested what he said there. But yeah, so it's something that I'm going to maybe look at in terms of performances going forward of different players who maybe been underperforming this season. But what I will say is, if you have made it this far in the podcast, make sure you go over to our YouTube channel and subscribe. We are trying to reach triple figures in subscribers, and your help is much appreciated. But now we'll move on swiftly to predictions. We make predictions every week on games. This week is an FA Cup week, which we all enjoy because the magic of the FA Cup cannot be matched. So over to you, Mike.
Okay, so we'll just very quickly recap on last week's scores. Obviously, for the coveted FIFA Day trophy, which I'm sure you can see over Ian's left shoulder in the cabinet. So we play for that each season. We get 1 point for a correct result, 3 points for a correct score. So the games, obviously, we've touched on very quickly is West Ham versus Everton and Arsenal Man United. You predicted for West Ham Everton, you went for a 2-1 Everton. I went for 2-1 West Ham. The score was 2-0 to West Ham, so 0 points for you and 1 point for me. Arsenal United, it had, I suppose, all the makings of a boring 0-0 draw, which you predicted, and I went for 2-1 to Arsenal after some back and forward within my mind as to what I think is going to happen. Obviously, the score was 3-2, so 0 points to you and 1 point to me. So 0 points for you for the week, 2 points for me. So the overall scores, Ian, you're currently on 34, and I've opened up that 4 point gap again. And I'm up to 38. So looking at this week's fixtures, obviously, as you mentioned, what's that? Sorry,
just put the 0-0 in the wrong place.
We'll go back and check if you want. This week's games, very tough one for us. We are away at Manchester City in the FA Cup, and you are away at Derby County. So Manchester City, Arsenal. I'll kick off because we're on the Friday. I'm under no illusions that this is going to be a tough test. Do I think we are going to play a full strength squad? Yes, I do. Because we've got a week then for recovery into the game against Everton, I believe. And obviously, I think we want to go as far as we can in this competition. The only thing I would say about that is, I wouldn't be too disappointed once again if we get knocked out of the FA Cup. Yes, I know it's a competition that we've won a substantial amount of times. Currently the leader in 14 FA Cups, but just with where we are this season, I would quite happily sacrifice this one in order to focus all our efforts on the league. Mm-hmm. But at the same time, I understand if you do want to go full chat, because obviously, as we said, Manchester City, they've likely to make a resurgence within the league and possibly bringing it close to the wire for the remainder of the season. So do we want to then shoot ourselves in the foot with limiting ourselves to only the Premier League trophy? I know we're in the Europa League as well, but I think it's going to be a tough game. And I think I'm thinking logically with where I'm at with the Premier League, maybe see some rotations. Obviously, we've made a couple of acquisitions, so it wouldn't surprise me if we see these start. So I'm going to go for 2-1 to Man City.
Yeah, it's a difficult one. I think you're more likely to go full strength than City is in that relation of trying to assert that dominance of mentality. We can beat you. City generally go with a second string keeper. I think it's Zach Steffen, if memory serves me correctly, the American guy who usually plays in goal for them in the cup games. You're gonna see the likes of Alvarez and Mahrez starting. Difficult one. It is a difficult one, and you're at home.
No, we're away.
You're away. Which has its strengths, has its weaknesses. I'm going to go... Is there replays in this FA Cup?
Yes.
I'm going to go 2-2.
Okay.
I don't quite think you will lay down and die, but I think at some point they're going to bring on the big gun and he's going to nick a late one. So, yeah, 2-2 for me, I think.
Okay, so that then brings us on to Monday's game, Derby versus West Ham.
Yeah, and we are away at Pride Park. Is it still called Pride Park? Oh, who knows? Derby, as we know, went through some financial troubles with themselves. They're currently sitting 4th in League One. So it's a topsy-turvy season because they're doing reasonably well. We're doing reasonably poor, all right, given the result against Everton being the anomaly. But for Derby County, they are a squad full of young and hungry players. They're playing some reasonable football, actually. Not the best all the time, obviously, but certainly isn't to be sniffed at. I think, if I'm totally honest, they're going to nick a 2-1 here. I feel like going up to Derby County, that place is going to be rocking. The players are going to be up for it. And actually, if we lose, if we make a mistake early on, which is what we tend to do, they'll capitalise on it, get another one, and then we'll nick something back late on, but won't quite be enough. So 2-1 to Derby County for me.
Okay. I am going to go slightly different to that. I mean, I have seen some of the lower league clubs come to bigger opposition and do serve up some interesting football. And by interesting, I mean they go... I think this is kind of like a bit of a game management issue where they want to go hell for leather for the first 20, 30 minutes. Yeah. Possibly nick a goal, as you say. But I think where there is a golfing class, I think it comes down to stamina. And with the Premier League, I think you've got that much more of an elite player that can last the full 90 minutes at the intensity that we see week in, week out. So I think this is going to be a West Ham win. Again, you've got kind of a few days rest after the FA Cup to jump back into the league. So I'm going to go for 3-1 to West Ham on this one.
It's one of those, like, if we go on a run and we win a few games and we push ourselves up the table, I'll be more than happy. But what I think is hard then, because West Ham are fickle, or the fan base is fickle, is that doesn't make up for what should have been happening for the last 12 months. Do you know what I mean? So it is a difficult one. I always want us to win, don't get me wrong, but I would like us to lose a few more games so we can make a positive change. Because I know some people have said, to me, it seems like you're very negative. You want your team to lose, and that's not very right, is it? It's not the case. I want us to win, but actually to force a change, we need to lose. But yeah, so let us know what your predictions are in the comment section below over on YouTube or on Twitter, whichever tickles your fancy. Mike, is there anything else that needs to be discussed in terms of football this week?
Just very quickly on a couple of transfers into Arsenal. We've seen, obviously we lost out to Leandro. No, I kind of spoiled it now. Makayo Mudryk last week to Chelsea.
Yep.
Very unfortunate. It does look quite a promising prospect, but in which case we have signed Leandro Trossard from Brighton, which I've got to say I'm really happy with. I know he had a bit of a 10-minute cameo in the game yesterday, but from what we've seen of him for the last couple of seasons, already the start of this season, I think he's a brilliant backup for us. And not only that, I think he's going to give good competition to the forward players.
Yeah.
We have also signed a defender, Jakub Wiewar, I want to say. Apologies if I've just sounded like I've had a stroke. Polish defender, just joined us for £20 million, and I've got to be honest, don't know much about him. But if the talent scouts that have gone through all the players that are available, and they picked these couple out, and we've seen what impact the recruitment have done over the last couple of seasons, is good enough for me. Obviously, time will tell. I know there've been a few bum transfers that come through the club already, but yeah, I'll be interested. Like I said, for the game against Man City, it wouldn't surprise me if we see a couple of new faces hit the ground running in the FA Cup.
I think for Arsenal, your signings are more about a squad depth at this point to try and compete on more fronts. And I say when you win the league and sign Declan Rice next year, you'll be high flying. The other thing, transfer wise, I was going to say was I alluded to it earlier. Danny Ings has signed for £15 million. He's played 15 minutes and he's out for 7 weeks. So that's West Ham. Just a quick question. While I named Declan Rice is on my mind. What position would you say he is best in? Would you agree that it would be as a defensive midfielder?
Yeah.
So if you was to play Declan Rice and Lucas Paqueta as a 2, you would expect Lucas Paqueta to play a bit further forward. Not under David Moyes.
Okay.
I think he's got to the point now where he realises he's the best player at the club and he plays where he likes rather than plays to his strengths. But, yeah.
That's one thing I do actually want to talk about next week, if possible, because I know we've been whittling on. But, yeah, this whole Declan Rice link to Arsenal thing. Obviously, as you were just saying, if you want to give us some ammunition for stuff to talk about within next week's episode, leave a comment below, and we'll certainly pick up those comments next week.
Indeed. But until then, I've been Ian.
I've been Mike.
And we'll see you very, very soon. Goodbye.